My name's Eric Meeks, and I'm the broker-owner of RE/MAX Desert Properties, which I own along with my wife, Tracy Wroblewski Meeks, in both Palm Springs and Indian Wells. And today I want to address a question that I get sometimes about why is Palm Springs a checkerboard? And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Palm Springs is literally a checkerboard of Indian lease land and fee simple land. And fee simple land is the type of land that most of you are already familiar with wherever you're from. You buy a house, it's on a chunk of land, you own both the house and the land, and it's yours forever, right, to pass on to your heirs and whatever you want to do with it. Whereas Indian lease land is not the same. That land has been established in a trust that's owned by the Agua Caliente tribe of Indians, and some of that land has been allotted out to individual tribe members. And the difference between those two is actually very little. It's just whether or not you're dealing with the tribe as a whole or an Indian tribal member. But in essence, it's the same thing where us as regular property owners buy a house on lease land. So you own the house, but you don't own the land. And you pay an additional monthly fee or annual fee, depending on the terms of your lease. And that goes up on a yearly basis or every 5 years or whatever the terms of the lease. And usually you negotiate these things out 30, 40, 50 years at a time. But you'll never own the land. So you have those two types of properties, okay, here in the Palm Springs area primarily. There is some in Cathedral City and Rancho Mirage, and if you go down valley towards Indian Wells and Indio and further out, there are other places with similar things because there are multiple tribes in the within a half-hour drive here. Okay, and they all have done similar things. But Palm Springs is most famous for it, so I'm going to focus there. What happened, okay, is in the early days of the country, and let's go to like the early 1800s, mid 1800s in there, as railroads started to be developed. A thing happened, and I should even go a little bit earlier than that. You can go back to Andrew Jackson, maybe even earlier. But at some point, there was a president who negotiated a treaty with the tribes out here in the desert where they could have a certain amount of land that they could live on in perpetuity forever, and that's just how it's going to go, right? Those were the deals that the U.S. government made with the Indian tribes to allow them somewhere to establish as their ancestral lands. Then the railroads came along. And when that happened, the government had a deal with the railroads that for every mile of track they laid, they got 20 miles on each side as part of their payment for building that infrastructure throughout the country. And that way the railroad can make money on the selling of land to establish towns, which would be advantageous to the railroad, so they had access to water, so they had access to wood and all the materials that they needed, to iron and mines and all those types of things, so they would have the steel and the wood and the water and the food and everything that they need, right, to feed and clothe and everything they do with the railroad. And then they can make a profit selling the land as the towns grew up along the railroad line. And that worked great. But what happened when the most obvious path for a railroad ran right through the middle of a reservation? That's when the government had to make a deal and amend their treaty that they had with the Indian tribe. Okay, so instead of them owning all of it, now the Indians on the checkerboard that is Palm Springs own the red squares. Half the land was taken away, and I don't remember if they adjusted it and gave them land elsewhere or what they did. It was probably something entirely unfair to the Indian tribe. That's the way these things usually go. But half the land became fee simple land, which the railroad could then sell off to landowners, right, and make the money from that. Even in those days, I'll tell you, it wasn't very much. It was nickels or dollars, you know, compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars and more that it is today. But still, they did it. They took that profit, and that's what became the fee simple land that would be the black squares checkered throughout Palm Springs. It was all thanks to a U.S. cavalry troop that came through in the 1850s that determined that the San Gorgonio Pass that runs up through Banning and Beaumont and then towards Riverside and Redlands and all of the places up there were along Interstate 10. Thank you for watching The Realtor Guy on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to this channel. We release new videos just about every week with helpful tips for real estate agents in the Palm Springs area and around the world. Thanks again for watching. I'm Eric Meeks, The Realtor Guy, signing off.